Hello, live stream Facebook.
Hello, Facebook. YouTube as well? Are we with YouTube?
We are
Yes,
with YouTube
as well.
The YouTubes?
Facebook.
Hi, YouTubes. Nice
Somebody
to see you
has
tonight.
discovered Zoom filters. Can you guess which one?
I think it's Ellie.
Yeah, me.
Was this going to be your Halloween costume?
This would be a great Halloween costume.
And all the kids would run.
Yeah, I know. That's the point. Don't have to give away all the candy. I had a weird thing happen at Halloween this year. Halloween, and so so Halloween here where I live in the suburb of Pittsburgh is from 6 to 8 p.m. And kids came, kids went, social distance, gave candy. And then at like a little after 9, the doorbell rings and there's a man. He has a ski mask over his face. He's holding a baseball bat in one hand and a backpack in the other. And he says, "Happy Halloween." I'm not making this up.
That's terrifying.
It was terrifying.
And he just walked away.
And I said, "Halloween's over." He said, "Okay." I mean, he was very clearly impaired, like inebriated with something. Okay. And man, was that a disturbing experience. Almost as disturbing as what you're seeing right here.
That might be where I'd call the police. I don't call them often.
I know.
But I'd call them on that one. Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to Generation 9/11 at 20. I am joined today by Berta DiPastino. Berta, how are you tonight?
I'm doing well. Todd couldn't be here.
I see that, and I'm so happy that you could fill in for Todd to help me out tonight.
No problem. Who are these people?
These are all our wonderful veterans. I'm so excited that they are going to be here with us tonight to appreciate the fact that Todd has found his computer filters. Not terrifying at all.
Right. Todd, I'm going to smack you. Driving you home right now. I'm going to punch you.
Okay. I'll back off.
Though I do appreciate the goatee, Todd. It's I want you to grow a real one. Just full.
I can't. That's why I love these filters so much. I can't actually. I have very little facial hair.
Oh no.
I know.
Well, I'm also joined by Ellie DiPastino. Ellie, how are you doing tonight?
Good. I haven't found the Zoom filter, so
probably a good thing. I'm so excited everybody's joining us for episode 2 here of Generation 9/11. We got a good program lined up for you. I'm super excited to get to our guests in just a short little while. Like I said, my name's Sean Hall. I'm the director of programming here with the Veterans Breakfast Club. And so I have some announcements to go through before we get into our main programming here. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. We are the Veterans Breakfast Club, the VBC. And this is Generation 9/11. I do love slides. PowerPoints just somehow like they just give you some good feeling in your soul. These are VBC's other programs. If this is the first time that you are joining us, not only is Generation 9/11 on Thursday nights, we have a VBC happy hour that happens Monday nights at 7. That is hosted by Todd DiPastino. And we also have our namesake Veterans Breakfast Club on Wednesdays at 9 a.m. This is all Eastern Standard Time. That is also hosted by Todd. And we also have another program called Greatest Generation Live that happens on Tuesdays at 7. The next one will be February 23rd, hosted by Glenn Flickinger, who is with us tonight. I believe I saw him in the room. Glenn, do we have confirmed that the P-51 pilot Bud Anderson will be joining us for the February 23rd event?
Todd, do we have that confirmed?
I'd say we do not have that confirmed as of yet, but I could check right now. We're close to confirming. Bud Anderson is 99 years old, and he has a PowerPoint, photos to share, and we've been going back and forth about how he could share them. But I'm hoping that we're going to be able to get him, because he does give wonderful talks about his experiences in World War II. And he's a fascinating person.
I have to say, I had the privilege to talk to him for about an hour late last week. And for 99, he's very sharp, very sharp. And, started telling me a couple of stories. It'd be really fun to have him on. And he is, I think, planning to come on. It's all a question of setting up the technical side of it with his PowerPoint and the slides.
Right. He lives in California.
Yeah.
Right.
Great. Well, consider this a teaser then, that we are close to confirming Bud Anderson. Also, March 16th, we got Elaine Wortham discussing A Bridge Over the River Kwai. I have to admit that I have not seen this movie, so I will have to tune in and watch it beforehand so I can be a part of the discussion. And lastly, our podcast, The Scuttlebutt, which we just recorded a new episode today that is released normally on Mondays. We do an audio version that you can find wherever you find your podcasts if you listen, and also a video version that Ellie is the editor of, and she's a fantastic editor. I can't sing her praises enough whenever we talk about The Scuttlebutt. But today's recording included Lee Wagner, Eric Lundgren, and Ryan All. We talked about the Vet Center, which we had a conversation about on Wednesday morning. The history of the Vet Center, how it came about, what they do, who they serve. It was a really wonderful conversation about that. And also we dove into a bit of the military-civilian divide, which is something that the Scuttlebutt consistently goes back to. It's a hot button topic for us. We want to make sure that we are attempting to understand military culture, as you can see. And I think that we bring up some really good points about how we can continue to bridge that divide and create a more harmonious relationship as we go along. So tune in next Monday for my conversation with Ryan, Eric, and Lee. And I don't know, are we still doing our stamp drive, Todd, for Henry?
And he has received many stamps.
I was wondering. Yes,
really was. He has. He just sent me an email and he said, like, I'm overwhelmed by the response to the stamp drive. Said, like, I didn't actually think I'd get that many stamps. And I don't know the number that he's gotten, but he's gotten quite a few. And he's looking to probably use about 1,000 stamps this year. And it sounds like the stamps that he has so far will keep him going and writing letters to World War II veterans for quite some time. So thank you to all of you. And I know many of you here tonight have sent Henry stamps. So thank you Henry, there you are.
Henry's
I didn't see
here.
that you were with us. I was just talking about you. Yeah. Could you give us a figure about how many stamps you have?
It's a lot. Probably hundreds.
Hundreds.
It's a lot of stamps.
I had a feeling whenever you have a mission like this and you come to a group like this, they're going to come out for you. So thank you, everybody, for sending Henry stamps. Henry, let us know if you are overwhelmed with your stamps, and we should put a stop on the ask. But it's great. Also, tonight, we have with us, I believe, Tony from the Operation Vet Now. I want to go over to Tony. Yes, Tony, I can see that your screen is dark, but we should be able to hear you.
Yeah, can you hear me?
We can hear you. If you could speak up just a touch for us, please.
Okay.
There you are.
Trying to get my camera on here, so.
It's okay. I'm going to go ahead and share. This is the banner that shows up on your website, the hashtag Be There for veterans and service members, dedicated to honoring and supporting our veterans and their families. I wonder if you could just tell us some about Operation Vet Now. What is the mission? How long have you been around?
Sure. Thanks for having me. We've been around about a little over 3 years. We started, there's 12 of us that got together. Most of us are retired military. And our real thing we look at is outreach. Oh, I think you got my camera going there. I just popped up.
There we go.
But we look at outreach. A lot of us, since we left the military, are marketers and sales and things like that. We did a lot of event marketing, and we wanted to see how we could help. And really the big thing we look at is veteran suicide, PTSD, traumatic brain injury, things like that. So we set up outreach events really all over the United States. And we like to do the old style grip and grin, set up events, have veterans come out, their families, bring organizations like yours together, and get vets connected to care. That's the core mission of ours is we know there's a lot of great organizations like this, and we want to help veterans find them and bring them together and, get connected to that care. And we also have a special program we call the Fallen Heroes Tribute. We do this at large scale sporting events where we pay tribute to a fallen hero, and we work with Gold Star families. We're doing a special tribute across the series right now with the World Snow Cross Championship. And it's a really cool thing. We're all volunteers. But again, that's the two core things OVN does is the outreach, going to large scale events, connecting with veterans and bringing them to organizations like some of these, the great ones that we have in here in Pittsburgh, that we go well beyond that. And we're getting ready to spin up our summer months. 1 May, we're working with veterans, helping veterans down in Homestead. So we'll have what we call the Veterans Village Air, which is a wide range of groups coming together, a motorcycle run out to the cemetery of the Alleghenies, where we'll do a special ceremony there, and several other events. So, that's the core mission, outreach to our veterans. Doesn't matter what area you served. We want to work and help with y'all. I'm a Gulf War era veteran. I retired in 2006. That's our passion, working with veterans and really connecting and making sure those that have fallen in combat are never forgotten. So thanks for having me on.
Oh, definitely. I have a question for you. How have you shifted sort of your process on this as the pandemic has been going on?
Yeah, that's been interesting. So, we were dead in the middle of a big tribute we were doing last winter. We had some great things planned for the summer, and like many organizations, it really put a damper on that. So, being that we're the live style outreach events, we've had to look back and change. And so, right now, for example, we're doing a virtual outreach with this Snow Crush Championship Series. So, we have a combination of, we have a couple pro riders that carry fallen heroes names on their snowmobiles and that they race, but we have some companies that came together to do some special giveaways to veterans. It's free. You take a survey, you ask, are there areas you'd like to learn more about, how I can get help with PTSD, get connected to the VA, whether it be registration or to your local vet center. I heard you mention Lee Wagner. We work with the vet centers all over the United States, and Lee is just I can't say enough good things about him and the White Oak Vet Center and Dan Merchant there. So we're doing it virtual now. In fact, anybody in the Pittsburgh area can log in, register. We've got some motocross helmets, different things of that nature that we give out. Everything works on an incentive, reason to show up and ask. But what happens is we then go and connect the veterans to these organizations directly, and we have a long list of them. And then we stay in touch with the veterans to make sure that they're getting the information they're looking for, and things of that nature. But it's been a big challenge, for as far as our area here. We're located in Monroeville, but we did do some things in the fall with Jennerstown Speedway, which was great. We connected with about 50 veterans there. We did some things out in Greensburg, PA with the veterans. And we connected with probably about 75 veterans there. So, small and large, our motto is, if we can make the difference in one life at an event, it's worth every hour we spent on it. So that's, and we're hoping, that the vaccines and everything like that is going to work. And we're, like I said, we're planning on 1 May and some other great things for the area. So
fantastic.
We'll be back in. So, and then thanks for what y'all do. This is pretty cool. So,
oh, thank you. And what service were you in?
I was Air Force.
Air Force. And what years were your service?
I went in right out of high school. 1984 and got out in 2006.
Great. And part of what we're doing tonight is we're talking about sort of the connection between Gulf War and 9/11 and into the first war or the war in Iraq. So hopefully you could stick around through this. If you have any questions that come up through it, feel free to chime in. I'd love to hear more about your service as well. So thank you. Thank you for coming on.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Of course. I also want to pop around the room a bit here and say hi to some people. Larry, Ed, Dave, it's great to see you. Jack, you have your hand up. I don't know if you want to say something or if you just waving.
Yes, I do. Relative to your program with the River Clyde, my brother Art, who lives down in Hilton Head, been a part of this program a couple of times. A close personal friend of his was a prisoner at that. And you might want to contact him, see if you can get some more information. And also into that, his wife was also at Bletchley Park during the war with the Cody people. So that would be the interesting part of it.
I didn't get all you said, Jack. Were you able to understand what Jack said? I think his microphone was clipping a little bit.
Oh, I don't know. Can you hear me now?
I heard you, but it's almost as if the mic is turned up too high or something like that.
Oh.
Sean, were you able to get much of what he
no,
said?
I agree with you. The mic's turned up a bit high, so it's a little difficult to figure out what you're saying, Jack.
Cut the volume down. Is that better?
That might help. Not fully.
Not fully. Okay.
Unfortunately.
There's a vibration.
And I wonder if you should sit back a little bit.
Okay. Is this better?
Yeah, that's better.
Oh, okay. My brother Art, who lives on Hilton Head,
Yep.
and close personal friend, was in the British military service, was a prisoner at the bridge of the River Clyde. And his wife was on the Bletchley Park with the Cody people in England. So he might be interested. You might be interested in calling him to see what he can add to this.
That's
That's
great.
on the February 23rd, I think you have that scheduled.
March 16th. Yeah, that's the March 6th. I will contact your
March.
brother Art. Yes.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I have the date wrong.
I will contact your brother Art. That's fantastic, Jack. Thank you so much.
Thank you for that connection.
He just got back from skiing out in Colorado. He's 97 years old.
Oh my God.
97 and he's skiing?
Yes.
Wow.
At Breckenridge.
And people should know that Jack's brother Art was a United States Navy Academy graduate, World War II veteran. Jack was a Marine in World War II.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a little Marine Navy rivalry, I imagine.
Well, incidentally, on my graphic where my name is, you don't have my last name.
Let's change that. I'll fix that right now.
We're going to fix that. I don't even like walking down the steps. I'm not going to... I'm gonna go skiing when I'm in my 90s.
Thank you.
I was only 20 when I took the bunny slope and got up there and then took my skis off and walked down.
I freaked out when I was 10 going up a pirate ladder. So forever changed my life. Going around the room. Carl Curtis, you're new here, it seems. I don't believe I've seen your name before. Welcome to VBC. I don't mean to call you out, but I'd like to say hi and see if you'd like to introduce yourself. Are you a veteran?
Yes, hello. I've been here a few times. I'm a retired Marine Corps, 84 to 04.
I'll echo Todd's comments from last week. Do we need another Marine?
I never said that. There's no record that I ever said that. I would.
I don't know if I have the experience or the experience yet to be able to poke fun quite yet. But
well, everything that Todd says, he's got a Marine cover behind his head there, a bear cap. So I know you're a big fan, Todd.
I am absolutely.
True. And I also wanted to take some time here for any COVID updates. We'd like to take a little time during the beginning of each program just to make sure if anybody has any updates, they've gotten their shot or if they've had an experience at the VA they'd like to share. If you do, John, yes?
Yeah, Sean, all is well. Had my second shot on the 9th. And absolutely, other than a little bit more injection site soreness than a flu shot, nothing. Not one of the reported, nasty after effects. And again, I encourage everybody, if you're a veteran, get signed up for the VA healthcare system. Get down there, get your shot. You don't have to stand in line all day on a Saturday. You can get down anytime you want. And matter of fact, if you have your DD 214, you can get down there, sign up on the first floor, go right upstairs to the second floor and get your COVID shot.
Awesome. Julia, you raised your hand?
Yes, I was there yesterday and a friend of mine drove me there and she's been looking for a place to get her COVID shot. She's 70 and she hasn't been able to get in anywhere, but they told her since she was a caregiver, we didn't say how much care she's given, but she did drive me there with the snow. And they gave her a form to fill out, which she can qualify then to get a shot there. She can start her shots if you're a caregiver. They take those also.
Great.
She's
Todd?
not a veteran.
Todd, this might be a good opportunity to mention our event coming up for Julia at the beginning of March. We have a
Julia?
100th birthday for Julia Parsons, Navy Wave, World War II, helped to decode Enigma. I was talking to my grandmother the other day, was talking about you, Julia, and said that you come onto our Zoom programs, and she was like, "Oh my God, how does she get on Zoom?" And I said, "She helped decode Enigma," and she goes, "Oh, okay."
I do
Zoom's
better
a-
on Enigma than I do on Zoom.
Yes, we're going to have a birthday party for Julia. It's still coming together. It's going to start at noon. It's going to be a parade outside her house. And we'll have a sign. We'll have, I know a lot of people want to participate in the parade. And then that evening, we're going to have a virtual birthday party. And Julia, I don't know if you know this, but we're going to be asking you questions about your life and having you just kind of, back and forth a conversation about not only your service, but your remarkable 100 years on this earth. So we will be sending out information about that, the Zoom link to that very soon. I want to do also say
Hey, Todd,
that,
can I say to Julia, please don't underestimate your Zooming skills. My dad is only 78, still has a flip phone and can't figure out how to scroll if the text is more than one line. And he's a biologist. Like, he's no dummy. So yeah. Great. Good for you.
What we oldsters need is a guidebook, and there isn't any such thing.
What you need to do is get like a 2-year-old nephew like I have to teach you how to move stuff around, because they know how to do this stuff in the womb.
Yeah.
They're born with it. My
Yeah,
13-month-old already knows how to scroll.
Yeah.
Don't know how she learned it, but hey.
Yeah. Evolution.
Yeah.
I would love to have Carl Curtis on. I'm sharing my screen here just because I want to let people know Carl, who just introduced himself seconds ago, Marine Corps veteran. He was in the news recently this fall for his walk from, I believe it was from Missouri to Florida, Carl, for PTSD.
Kentucky, Tennessee, Alabama, and Georgia.
Okay,
Wow,
Kentucky,
I
Tennessee,
remember.
Alabama, Georgia. And some really interesting conversations that you had with people about PTSD. And I think that would be a wonderful program to focus on, not only, your service, your interest in the subject, and that experience that you had kind of walking through the South, meeting people about that. And then before, Sean, I'm sorry, I want to throw it to you, but I saw Bart Womack here, and I just wanted to introduce him also. I think he was here for the first time. Maybe he has signed off. Okay, if he comes back on, I'll introduce him because he is, I think, a 29-year veteran of the Army, and and now works for works for the Institute for Veterans and Military Families at Syracuse University. I just thought I'd introduce him. He's a fascinating story. So maybe he'll come back.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Todd. And one of the segments that I like to do with Generation 9/11 is, I started it last week, is sort of reviewing the timeline of events that have sort of transpired over the last 20 years. What we wanted to do, though, is because the first episode dealt with the day of 9/11, the timing that sort of happened that day, in thinking about how the Gulf War came through and bled into 9/11 and then into the war in Iraq. I wanted to go back a little bit further, and I saw a really incredible documentary this past week. It's a 3-part series. I believe it was from History Channel. You can see it on Canopy. That's with a K, canopy.com. Really excellent interviews with special agents, politicians, everybody who was sort of involved, CIA, FBI, involved in a lot of the terrorist operations that were happening the decade prior to 9/11. But I thought I'd share some of the information that I pulled from that, as I think it sort of will be a part of the conversations that we have tonight. So, what the documentary started off with was the assassination of Rabbi Kahane, an Israeli-American rabbi and politician, by El Sayed Nasser. This led to an investigation of a terror cell that was in Brooklyn, and actually was the terror cell that did the World Trade Center bombing in '93, which was orchestrated by Ramzi Youssef. It's interesting because their demands were to stop all military and economical and political aid to Israel. All diplomatic relations with Israel must stop, not to interfere with any of the Middle East countries' interior affairs. But Ramzi was eventually captured. He was captured in the Philippines. And his uncle was Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. Now, he ended up being the architect of the 9/11 attack. And it's interesting because he was picked up several years after 9/11, and he's actually still being held in Guantanamo Bay. I found an article that said that he was supposed to start his trial in January of this year. But due to COVID, at this point, it seems like it's being postponed. There's not much information out there about what is actually going on with his trial. It was going to be held in Guantanamo, but he was the uncle of the orchestrator of the '93 World Trade Center bombing. So KSM's captured. He's captured in Pakistan. He actually went on Al Jazeera and admitted to 9/11. But as we sort of move forward into the timeline, the first Gulf War backwards, I'm sorry. The first Gulf War happens. We go in. We have troops stationed in Saudi Arabia. Osama bin Laden did not like this. He did not like the fact that Americans were based in Saudi Arabia. So he actually offered the Saudi prince, hey, I will get you troops. I will bring troops to you. Saudi prince did not want that. He said, he trusted more the men that he was getting from the West and the coalition than he did bin Laden. That caused a rift. Because obviously, and I could show you a map here, here we are. So he did not like the fact that Americans were in Saudi Arabia, where Medina and Mecca are at, these being the holiest cities of Islam. So I wanted to show a quick map just to show sort of like geographically what we're talking about. And this led to that rift. The US's war termination strategy didn't go very well. We had troops still stationed in Saudi Arabia. Bin Laden took offense to this. And that's sort of how we go forward in the timeline that leads us into the order and 9/11 happening. But I do want to jump now to our first guest, and that's Peter Thenz. I do believe I saw Peter. Yes, Peter does have your video off, but yeah, you are, Pete. How are you?
Hey, good evening, everybody.
Is it Pete or Peter? I want to make sure I get this right.
You know, as long as you don't call me by my full name, that's only when I'm in trouble.
So Pete?
Yeah, Pete's fine.
Okay. Pete, you enlisted in 1986 as a military intelligence counterintelligence agent, correct?
Correct, yes.
Why?
Actually, I went, I was actually scheduled to go to IUP as a to go into criminology in 1985 when I graduated from high school. But I was kind of not sure what I wanted to do. And about a week before school was supposed to start, I went to my parents and I did that. I'm not sure I want to go. Can I have a year? And now my mom, who's talked at Veterans Breakfast Club in the past, both my parents were in the Navy, but they never like pushed me towards going to the service. In fact, I never really heard any stories. And Todd can attest to this. At one of the Veterans Breakfast Clubs, she was telling a story, and I was looking at her like, "Who the hell is this woman? I've never heard this before."
Mm-hmm.
So, long story short, I decided to take a year. A recruiter got a hold of me, an Air Force recruiter got a hold of me, said I'd have to wait 6 months to be a military policeman or security police. And of course, 18 years old, I'm like, 6 months, that's forever. Well, around the corner comes the Army guy. Hey, I'll get you in next month. Sure, let's do that. So I went to the ME, what do you call it, downtown Pittsburgh, the MEP station. And I had high enough scores that he looked at it. He goes, "Hey, I want you to watch this video." So he goes over, opens up unlocks this cabinet, pulls out a video, puts it in, says, "I'm not actually allowed to watch it. You watch it, and then we'll talk when I'm done." And it was for counterintelligence. And of course, it had all the, this is 86. So it had all the James Bond stuff, but, more of a field variety. And I was just like, yeah, hey, that sounds pretty cool. Let's try that. So I went down to be an MP, and I ended up coming back. My parents were like, "What are you going to do?" And I was like, "Military intelligence." And I just remember my dad kind of going like that. So, and that's, I went to training in Fort Huachuca, Arizona.
Mm-hmm.
And my first duty assignment was in 86. I was in West Germany, Dusseldorf, West Germany.
And what were you, why were you stationed there, being in military intelligence?
Well, you had the Cold War going on. So our mission, we wore suit and tie all the time. We didn't wear uniforms. So our mission was, we were counterintelligence. So we would respond to units. Well, we had units that had nuclear sites, and they were in our area. So we had to go, if they saw people acting shady, they called us. We went out and we investigated stuff like that. We tried to do sting operations. They didn't always work. We worked hand in hand with the Germans. And for the first 4 years I was in the military, I actually lived on a British Army base. So there weren't even any Americans around. So think about being 18, living in another country, but also living on a base of another country. It was like kind of like double culture shock, I would say.
That's what I was going to ask. How did that feel? Like, as a young guy, fairly very important job. Did you feel the weight of that responsibility?
Not at first. Not at first. I mean, I enjoyed it because now looking back, I'm glad it worked out that way, because it gave me an appreciation for other cultures.
Oh, that's so annoying.
Because for one, I'm living in Germany, learning the German culture, but I'm also living on a British Army base with other soldiers. They're just British soldiers. And so I had to learn their culture as well. So it set me up in the future, because when I did go back to Germany with a family, or when I was in Saudi or in Iraq or in Afghanistan, I realized that, hey, not everybody acts and thinks and prays and laughs and, does things like me. But I also realized there are more things in common, even in other cultures. And as you get older and you have kids, and, you have both kids of your own, and you train soldiers who they're kind of like your kids at time. um, you realize that there's only a little bit that's different and there's a lot that is similar.
Yeah. And
So that taught me.
So you changed your MOS though to become a military policeman in 1990. Was that always sort of like then your drive? You're like, eventually I'm going to switch over.
No, that wasn't. The only choice I was given was my wife was in the British Army, and even though she had as high clearance as I did, I was forced to give up my top secret clearance, and they said the only job you can't do military intelligence anymore. So they gave me a couple options, and I defaulted back to being an MP.
They took that away because you got married?
Yes, because my wife is technically a foreign national.
Okay.
So, and the British Army didn't have any problem with it. So I kind of scratched my head and say, who would you have more trouble with? Your soldier marrying a counterintelligence agent, but they had trouble with a counterintelligence agent marrying a soldier of the British Army. And I was like, I thought we're allies,
When you switched, did that carry with it the idea that you would be deployed to the Gulf?
No, not at all. Not at all. This was 89. I went to MP school at Fort McClellan, Alabama. It was a hard transition for me because I spent 4 years pretty with a lot of not on my own as a member of a team, but I was being a junior soldier. I was never treated as a junior soldier. I was treated as an agent, a counterintelligence agent. So when I became an MP and I got back, I was a specialist. I get stationed at Fort Meade, and right off the bat, I had sergeants jumping in my ass just because that's what sergeants do. Pardon my French. I'm sorry. That's the worst I'll do. Okay. But jumping in my butt because that's what sergeants do. So this first 6 months was very, very hard for me. And then my wife was in Scotland. She had got out of the British Army. So we were trying to get her moved here. And then I just remember I was on shift, working road shift as an MP. And
what is road shift?
You work as a patrolman, like the police. Well, and I think it was on a day shift, and they were like, "Hey, after shift, you got to go over to the chapel." Well, our whole battalion of MPs was meeting in the chapel, and our lieutenant colonel comes out, and he's like, "Okay, guys, we're going to be going to Saudi Arabia in about a month," and that was our warning order for Desert Shield.
What was the feeling at that point?
I clueless. I didn't know. We were all there, and I wasn't the only one. We were, you got to realize that, especially the junior soldiers, we didn't expect to go to combat of that magnitude. I was in a unit that we deployed to like Honduras and Panama, and we did security missions. But those are very small operations, and they're easy to train for and get comfortable with. Now you're talking about, hey, the whole US military is going, and I mean, I remember news people there all the time. Hey, what do you expect? What do you expect? We didn't have a clue. And our senior NCOs, like our master sergeants, because even the staff sergeants and sergeants first class, they really were not Vietnam vets. You had a big gap in there. So, I mean, if you weren't special operations, then you didn't have any kind of combat experience with Grenada or Panama. So, I mean, the bottom line is we didn't know what to expect. So we were very apprehensive. Plus, I had mentioned this in the previous Veterans Breakfast Club. I spent 4 years of my life in the European theater with the Cold War. Now, and then I get to a unit where their mission oriented is Central and South America. And now all of a sudden they're saying, hey, we're going over here to the Middle East. And, we were all like, but we didn't have the proper uniforms. I remember we had to paint our Humvees when we got in the country. We had to paint them sand color. Very just not ready for it at all. So it was
that level of mobilization, do you tend to feel like a very small cog in a very, very big machine?
Yes. And as a junior soldier, and I was in for quite a few years. So I went from being a junior soldier, just kind of going with the flow, to becoming a sergeant and a staff sergeant where I trained soldiers for missions, to being a senior NCO where I was actually responsible for company size elements to be ready to go places like that. So, as I look back, there were definite levels.
I want to pop over to Mary real quick. Mary, you had your hand up. I want to make sure you had a question or a comment.
Yes. Sean, I had mentioned to you that I knew a New York City police officer that worked this case. And if it's okay with you, I'd just like to kind of delve the weird things that happened to break that case. Is that okay?
You're talking about the case that against the terror
rabbi,
cell. Yes, the rabbi.
Yes.
Yeah, Kahane.
So this was in 1990, and I have it written down, so that's why I'm kind of looking at my screen. And it was his first day as a lieutenant. His name's Ed Norris. And he was called to the murder of the rabbi. This rabbi was extremely controversial. So he's murdered by Egyptian national El Sayed Nasser living in Jersey City. Well, Nasser fled the hotel and he jumped into a cab. He quickly exited when he realized it wasn't who he was supposed to be with. And he jumped out and he was shot by a postal police officer. And so in the list of his things in his wallets, the police found an address in Jersey City. So they went there and these two Egyptian men answered the door. And through the interviews, these men admitted that they were the cab drivers. Well, what they've been doing was they've been waiting outside that hotel for him, but a meter maid made a move. When you go to New York City, you can't idle, so they made a move. Well, literally in the time it took them to circle the block, he had shot the rabbi and then jumped out thinking that was his friend's cab. And then he's like, oh crap, that's not them. And he jumped right out. And so all literally a meter maid, really solved this whole case for them. And so anyway, through all these warrants and everything, they found US classified military documents, bomb making manuals, building plans of landmarks in New York City, including the World Trade Centers. And so Ed, this young lieutenant, he was like, this is a bigger threat, but his superiors are like, keep quiet, just hand it all over to the feds. The two cab drivers never charged. Nasir went to prison. So then fast forward to 1993, the van is rented by one of those released cab drivers that is used to bomb the World Trade Center. And during that trial, all those documents that Ed turned over to the feds finally came into the court. And it's the first time the words Al-Qaeda are revealed to the American people. And literally all of that. So he's a radio show host now, and he tells that story. And I mean, my blood boils, and his blood boils. Like you can hear it in his voice. Like you can just, I always joke that I see the vein in his head throbbing. And he said, yeah, it's right here, but that we had it the whole time. Yeah. And they didn't do anything about it. It's very frustrating.
There were a lot of missteps along the way. If you watch the documentary, it definitely makes your blood boil. Thank you for that, Mary.
But I mean, all that a meter made.
Yeah. And if you want to reach out to him and connect us, it'd be love to have him on to
he
talk.
didn't answer my email to him. But sometimes he doesn't read his emails and then he'll be like, oh, I missed that one. So I'm going to try again. Because if you, like I said, if you saw him tell this story, you would watch the vein pop.
Well, thank you, Mary. Yeah. So Peter, I want to get back to your deployment. You get into the Middle East. Where did you land?
Well, we landed, I think it was a King Fahd Air Base. The one thing that I gotta say I liked over my career as an MP was even the training. We had a daily mission. It didn't matter whether we were at war or at peace. We were policemen. So security was always prevalent. Foremost on our mind, whether we were at war or not.
Can I interrupt with a question?
Yeah.
This is very much a civilian question. And for those who I have not had the pleasure of meeting on our Zoom call, I am not a veteran. So sometimes I ask these questions. is a military police person, are they in charge of being the police for the military, or is their MOS to police the area around the base? I kind of want to understand that role a bit more.
Well, we police the military, yes.
Mm-hmm.
On the federal end, if you go on any military base, that's a federal reservation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the military police have jurisdiction in that on that reservation. So, like one of the places that I was stationed at, I was at West Point for 6 years. Now, I've used this phrase before, and I hope it doesn't offend anybody. I was not a kid idiot stationed at West Point. Okay. I was a military policeman there. Anybody, and we had a lot of, now it being a historic site, we had a lot of visitors come on. Once you step foot onto a federal installation, you belong to us.
Mm-hmm.
If you're caught running stop signs, speeding, doing anything illegal, we take care of you and put you in front of a federal magistrate.
Okay.
Okay.
And that extends over into the Middle East. You're deployed, you're on the base.
Well, yes. But what we normally, and this happened all throughout the combat operations, we don't do things like run speed traps or respond to domestics, anything like that, domestic disputes, anything like that. When you're in a combat situation you have a base commander wherever you're at, the unit becomes responsible for the policing, so to speak. So if guys get into a fight in the barracks, the unit commander, he has complete jurisdiction to met out punishment or do whatever.
And that never happens.
Oh, it happens all the time.
So you land in the Middle East. How did it feel to be deployed into a war zone?
It was a little surreal at first. We were talking a couple of weeks ago about the first Gulf War. One of the problems we had was we didn't have GPS. We had a system called a plugger. It's don't ask me what the acronym stands for. If I can make something up, but it wouldn't even be close.
If someone knows it, throw it into the chat.
Yeah, but it was called a plugger. Now what you had to do was you had to hold this item, get a satellite link, and then it would tell you where you were at. Mm-hmm. But it took like 10 minutes to do. So guess what? We didn't bother with that. Okay. This became a problem in the job that I did, because one of the main missions that we had was we were convoy security, and we were what's called MSR security, main supply routes. So I was in a Humvee. I was a specialist at the time. I had a sergeant who was my team leader, and I had another specialist who was my gunner. I was the driver. What we did was we were given like huge areas. I mean, like 100 square miles. And we were responsible for traveling all these roads and just making sure that if anything goes wrong, we were in radio communication and we could help sort things out.
These probably weren't safe roads either. Thinking about Brad's conversation last week, there was probably a lot of minefields. Is that right?
Not in the first Gulf War.
Okay.
We weren't anywhere. Well, we weren't supposed to be anywhere near the front lines. Mm-hmm. There was once or twice when I think my team leader did this with the map. And when he did stop and use the plugger, and we found out we were actually in Kuwait and we were behind the enemy, we were like, we weren't where we should have been, and we hightailed it back to where we should have been. That happened a couple times.
John Haas says the plugger is a precision lightweight GPS receiver.
Yes.
That's 2 thumbs up.
I agree.
That's correct.
So as long as the acronym doesn't have an F in it, Foxtrot, it's safe on what I might come up with. So
yeah.
And then at one point, I actually shared a picture with Todd. I don't know if you had it. The little tent.
I should have a picture here. Hold on.
That was my home for about 2 months.
Oh, sorry. I had to pull this one up.
No, that's okay.
Those are fantastic, though.
Well, that was basic training. And then the other one was after 2 years of being in military intelligence. You notice that's probably the first time I wore my uniform in 2 years, and it was just to get the photo done.
You do look a lot smarter in the one on the right. So we have this, there's the tent.
Yeah. Okay. So that was what we did. One of our jobs was we became a radio relay tower. Now you got to remember the communications back in this day were not what they are nowadays. No 5G anywhere. So we had to put up an antenna, and then as messages were relayed up and down the main supply routes, we had to make sure the message got from behind us to in front of us, type of deal.
Okay.
And there was my 3-man team. That's where we lived for like probably about 2 months.
No shower.
No. I do have a funny story about that. So we didn't have showers, of course, but we used jerry cans full of water. And what you would do is, you do a washcloth and, the jerry can with water and stuff like that. And I remember one time, I'm doing my thing, and I look around. I'm on the top of this plateau. I can see miles around, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's not like there's anybody there. So I drop my trousers, and I'm just taking care of business. And all of a sudden, this helicopter comes flying right up and over the plateau. And it was close enough to see me going, oh shit. And they were actually laughing and pointing. I could see them laughing and pointing.
See, that's not what I thought of. I thought the sand flying around would probably be the problem.
No, they flew over so fast, but there wasn't a sandstorm or anything. But I was like, I know now there's somebody out there telling the story. One day we were flying over this MSR, and all of a sudden there's this guy up on top of there, and we caught him in the middle of his daily routine.
We're going to search out that story and find it and bring them on to talk about you. Yeah. So up on the top of that plateau, did you deal with any of the sandstorms, and did you see any of the oil fires?
No. We were up there for about a month, maybe 2. And then all of a sudden they were like, don't look up in the sky over the next couple nights. Mm-hmm. There wasn't a whole lot of communication going on. There, a lot of things were happening that we didn't know about. And come to find out, they were starting the bombing campaign. So with the lasers, they didn't want us looking up and having the lasers burn our eyes out, which I found out later wasn't even a thing. They were just being overly cautious. And then once that started, we picked up stakes, and our whole unit, we moved forward. Mm-hmm. And a couple of us got assigned to the 2nd Armored Cavalry Regiment. We were kind of piecemealed out, and as the ground war actually started, we were still pulling security, but as the forces moved forward, we were behind, making sure that anybody that got around them, we could deal with them.
Wow. Were you there through the whole 100 days?
Yes.
100 hour? Yeah, the whole 100 hour?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And the next picture I was going to share here was, I believe, your homecoming.
Yes. That was at Fort Meade. My wife was adamant that we would be home before her birthday, which was at the end of March. And we made it home, I think it was the middle of March.
Her being in the British Army, and she was out at this point when you were deployed, correct?
Correct.
What were her thoughts about you being deployed into the Gulf?
Well, when I first called her to tell her we were going to get deployed, I was like, how am I going to explain this to her? Because she was over in Scotland. We didn't video chat. It was all telephones back then, long distance phone calls. And I remember telling her, I'm going to get deployed to Saudi Arabia for this war that's coming. And the first thing she said to me was like, well, you're a soldier. You got to do what you got to do. Mm-hmm. Something to that effect. So it was very much what one soldier would say to another soldier, as far as, suck it up and do it.
Right. How was the homecoming? What was it? Jubilant? What did you say? Did you feel very welcomed back?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Matter of fact, I still get choked up. If I see a homecoming, I'm a big baby. I see homecomings even today on TV in a TV show, I get choked up because I just remember what it was like, seeing the family and all that.
Yeah.
So,
or are you in this picture?
yeah, somewhere in the back there.
Somewhere in the back. This was at a high school gymnasium, I'm guessing.
Well, it's a gymnasium on base. Yeah.
Okay.
So it was. I don't know why they had it inside. They could have had it outside.
Mhm.
This was my platoon. We took this picture shortly after getting back from the first Gulf War.
Mhm.
So,
and how did your MOS change? Did it change? Like, what was your next mission after getting back?
well, we got back, and then we were a unit assigned to the Forces Command, which is referred to as Force Com.
Mhm.
Once we got back from the first Gulf War, they put us back on rotation for Honduras and Panama. And I think actually we ended up moving from Fort Meade to Fort Stewart. So they gave us a little bit of a break so that we could move the whole company to Fort Stewart, Georgia.
Mhm.
And when we got down to Fort Stewart, Georgia, I think we were there for a couple months. We went to Hurricane Andrew to help with relief down there.
Mhm.
And then we did a 4-month deployment down to Panama. So back when we used to own the Panama Canal and have to provide security.
Right. So I want to flash forward now up to 9/11 and ask you the question that I think we'll consistently ask on this program is where were you and how did that change your life?
Okay. Much like everybody talks about, I remember exactly where I was when 9/11 happened.
Mhm.
I was stationed in a place called Hohenfels, Germany. Any soldier that's been to Germany groans when they hear Hohenfels because it's a training area.
Mhm.
So I lived on the nice part of base where it wasn't all dirt and training. So I was actually there for 8 years. So I remember it was in the afternoon because, of course, everything happened over here in the morning. So we're like 7 hours ahead.
Mhm.
I was watching TV. I just got off a shift that day, watching TV with the kids, and I saw the second plane hit the tower. And I thought to myself, I'm pretty good with movies. I said, well, I don't remember seeing this movie before. And then I saw Live, and then it all kind of hit me. Happened keep in mind the experience that I've had in the past dealing with terrorists and chasing them and stuff like that. It happened at the worst time because my boss, who was the provost marshal, he's the officer in charge of the MP station, he was on leave. The second guy in charge, my NCOIC, he was on leave. So I was the guy that was in charge of the station. Now all of a sudden I start getting phone calls, and a lot of it was knee-jerk reactions. Oh my God, we're going to war, this and that.
Mhm.
I kind of got in trouble because I had to go to the base commander's office, and I've got all these officers running around. Some weren't even Gulf War vets. Some were just training officers that had never dealt with anything like this before.
So it's a bit of chaos. It was a bit of chaos on the.
It was, but what you have to realize as well is when 9/11 happened over here, we had already dealt with the USS Cole
Mhm.
bombing. There were a few other things that happened in Europe and the Middle East that we were already at a threat con level where you couldn't just walk onto our base or drive onto our base. We were already kind of up
Elevated
there as far as the level.
Mhm.
So I made the mistake of not running around like a chicken with my head cut off, and I got yelled at it quite a few times.
Mhm.
But when my boss finally got back off of leave, he was like, he made the colonel realize, hey, he was one of the few guys around here that kept things running while the rest of you were trying to do stupid stuff.
Mhm.
And so that was, but again, not that it wasn't a big deal, but with my counterintelligence background as well, the first thing I really thought was, we've been waiting for something like this to happen for quite a while.
Yeah, Dave Sever put into the chat the 2 embassies in Africa had been bombed prior to 9/11 as well. That was sort of something else that I think Al Qaeda took responsibility for. So having been to the Gulf, you have this elevated awareness already at the base. I find it interesting the sort of the difference between the civilian mindset of experiencing 9/11 and the chaos that ensued, and the military mindset of watching this happen and saying it's go time. Or what was your feeling? Was it okay, time to go back to war? I'm ready to go. I want to be there. How did you feel about that?
Well, we knew there was going to be an escalation. Now, the training base that I had been on, we actually trained soldiers coming from the States to go to Bosnia on the United Nations peacekeeping missions. So we had already been geared up as a training area. So we kind of figured we were going to start training soldiers to go to the Middle East now.
You didn't really quite know where at that point. It was just, this is going to happen, right?
Right. Right. So, then it just, now the one thing that didn't drive me nuts was the fact that I already had a job that regardless of whether we were in peace or war, my job didn't change much. We still had to deal with criminal behavior. We still had our military police stuff to do, our security stuff to do. So that kind of kept me at an even keel. So
how was it training the people that were coming through? Were they sort of really gung ho about getting back at the enemy?
Well, you had two types, and this will make sense after what I said earlier. You had the people that were in school when 9/11 happened, and now they wanted to go get their piece of the action. And you had veterans from the first Gulf War, and the time frame between the two was only about 10 years. So
not even, yeah.
That gap was smaller than the gap that I had to deal with between Vietnam and the first Gulf War. That was a lot larger gap. Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah, definitely.
So the training wasn't there. There was more of a let's get this done as compared to what is going on. What I had as a junior soldier.
And it was a while before you were deployed again. Is that right?
It was. In fact, the base that I was stationed on, because it was a training base, we didn't really get deployed out of there. I had actually, you when you're in your career, there's sometimes you make choices where you realize it's going to close some roads off to you. I stayed there for 8 years because there were some family things going on, and I figured that by staying there an extra tour, it was going to cost me in the end as far as getting promoted and staying in longer. Somehow I got stationed. I went from Germany to West Point. The only thing about West Point was, again, with the job I have, we worked, there were sometimes we would work, 14 days, 12-hour shifts, which it doesn't compare when you're in a combat zone. Because I got to go home every night and see my family and all that. But I mean, you still worked your butt off. Then when I left West Point, I ended up back to Fort Stewart. And I always joke around and tell people the reason I ended up at Fort Stewart was God has a sense of humor. When I first left Fort Stewart, when I left it, of course, I flipped it off and said, I don't ever want to go back there again as I drove out the gate. Well, 15 years later, good Lord has a sense of humor and says, guess where you're going to go? Back to Fort Stewart. I got back to Fort Stewart. I was in a division, 3rd Infantry Division MP station. I worked, my boss worked directly for the general who was in charge. And within a month of being on Fort Stewart, I went back over to Iraq. So,
and this is, let me share my screen. This is you back in?
That's in Tikrit. That was one of our really sandy days. I thought I took the picture to send home to show him. I said, hey, I think I'm on Mars.
So it looks like it. What was, as a side thing, what was that like? Just experiencing a sandstorm?
Oh, it was, sand got everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was like your worst day at the beach, only just like Groundhog Day kept happening over and over and over again.
How long would they last? Like several days?
There were a couple that lasted 2 or 3 days. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
I'm sure even standing there wasn't pleasant.
it's so funny the things you get used to. It really is. You just get used to it. And there's that phrase that I know Todd has heard before. You've heard before too. Embrace the suck.
Yeah.
So
yeah, we talked about that on the scuttlebutt. Embracing the suck. You just have to bear down and get it done. How long were you in Iraq at this point when this picture was taken?
Probably about 6 months.
Was it odd being back there after Gulf War?
It was totally different. I mean, it was some things seemed like it was the same, but it was totally different the way missions happened.
Mm-hmm.
So this was I was in the 3rd Infantry Division, which is of course the made famous by Audie Murphy.
Mm-hmm.
And Rocky the Bulldog was our mascot. He was actually drawn by Walt Disney.
Really?
Yeah.
There's a bit of trivia for you, Todd, which I'm sure you probably already knew.
I didn't, but it's good trivia. The Rock of the Mars.
Yeah. So at this point in these pictures, you're already back, I'm guessing.
No, this was I was still in Iraq. This was 09, so you had a lot of USO people coming over.
Mm-hmm.
This guy here, if anybody is an MMA fan, this guy here is Heath Crazy Horse. I think his last name was Herringbone or Harrington. He was an MMA fighter in the UFC.
Mm-hmm.
So normally you just stand there next to him and you can take pictures and all this. And I was like, Heath, put me in a headlock. And he goes, really? I said, yeah. So he threw me in a headlock. So it's got to have fun with what you're doing. So
well, definitely. And I'm sure that this was taken into the field as well, correct?
Yeah, we were like, who has a bigger gun? So because we worked in I'm using air quotes, an office environment. I mean, we did go out on missions, but for the most part, we were in there overseeing things.
Mm-hmm.
We got tagged with doing so much silly stuff. For Cinco de Mayo, they wanted us to make a piñata. So
that's what this is a piñata.
It's a piñata. But then we were like, no, you can't break this, and we're not putting candy in it. So
I was gonna say you put MREs in it. This is big enough for that.
A lot of stuff in it. So of course, when the general saw our what we had contributed, he looked at us, he was like, freaking MPs, of course you did something like that.
That's the theme of the night.
Yeah, pretty much. So.
Yeah. Oh, so how did you pronounce it? Tikrit?
Tikrit. It's actually where they found, it was Saddam Hussein's home.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was his home. And that's where they found him about 5 years prior to me being there. That's where they actually found him.
And it seems to me both places that you were at in Iraq and Afghanistan were pretty kinetic places. Northern Iraq, southern Afghanistan. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah.
How was it? I mean, your first deployment in the Gulf War, did you see much combat at that time? And if you didn't, what was it like being in these sort of hot spots and, in war in Iraq and Afghanistan? We
heard more things going on around us than we were actually directly involved in the first Gulf War.
Mm-hmm.
The difference was in the first Gulf War, we could drive around and we didn't have to worry about people shooting at us or trying to blow us up. So
Mm-hmm.
that was a complete 180 when we went into Iraq and Afghanistan. The base that I was actually on in Iraq, just a little history about it. A few years later, when you remember when you had what was it called when the word just went out of my head. Al-Qaeda started up again, but they had is
that ISIS or ISIL?
Yeah, ISIL started back up, but they had the Sultanate or the Caliphate that they created.
Mm-hmm.
in the news, they had shown where they were killing. They lined up a bunch of Iraqi cadets, and they shot them and put them in ditches.
Mhm.
That was the base that I was originally on. So as I was watching it on the news, this is of course about 3 or 4 years later, the streets that I had walked up and down in places I had been on, this is where they were actually killing these Iraqi cadets. We had left it in the Iraqi hands, and the Iraqi armed forces left and told the cadets, hey, find your way home.
Mhm.
And they ended up getting caught by members of the caliphate and just massacred.
The wars between Iraq and Iran, and especially the civil war happening in Afghanistan, a lot of what I'm reading, there was a lot of that type of brutality that was happening consistently. The more that I research, it's pretty brutal.
But the one surreal thing about that was just when it'd be like someplace that you lived for a while, and all of a sudden it's in the news, like, hey, I know that place. I've literally been there. You always feel a connection to it.
Yeah.
That was the real surreal thing about it. So,
Peter, there's more I want to dive into with you, and I want to come back to you in a future Generation 9/11. I want to talk about you coming back from these two wars, how that differed, maybe was similar to your Gulf War experience, how your retirement, reflecting on your career, and I want to like almost part two that experience, that story with you, if you're okay with that.
yeah.
Because I find it really fascinating, everything you've talked about tonight, and I really appreciate you sharing. And I also do want to respect John DeLallo, that we had a story from John that we want to get to tonight. Excuse me. And Dave Sever, I'm going to have to apologize to you. I got pictures for you, and if you're willing to join us next week, I want to jump into those pictures as well. So I apologize that if I'm not able to get to those tonight. But Peter, thank you so much for sharing tonight. And I do want to come back to you soon, so that we can sort of finish out this, rounding out your career throughout all of this, because you many decades within the military.
Thanks, Sean. I appreciate it. Thank you, everybody, for your time.
Of course. And stick around, please, because John, you have a really interesting story that we want to highlight tonight. You had emailed me last week after we had talked to Brad about him being near the Pentagon when it was struck on 9/11. You were also quite near the Pentagon whenever it was hit. And I thought I'd ask you to go through your story and sort of lead us through the setup. How did you get to where you were?
Well, it's not really complicated. I'm going to skip over some of the history. Most everybody knows that there really was no Iran and Iraq, what have you, until 1922. And that was a result of the Anglo-Iraqi Treaty of 1922. That was a result of the 1920 Iraqi revolt against British rule. And I'm reading from my notes so I don't stray here. By the early 80s, it was pretty obvious that the balance of power in Southwest Asia was going to be altered, and likely it would impact the United States. And Iran or Iraq would emerge with significant military dominance and a dictatorship, very likely not friendly to the West. The Iran and Iraq war ran from 80 to 88. Preparations for preserving the peace in Southeast Asia, likely by force of arms, to my knowledge, began in earnest in 1985, probably before. Armored units prepped in California desert, and I served TDY at MacDill Air Force Base as a
What is TDY?
I was TDY at MacDill.
What's TDY?
In Florida, down there with everybody come in, and
TDY for temporary duty.
Temporary duty. Okay.
TDY, yeah, temporary duty. Exactly.
Okay. Thanks.
And I was down there for a short period of time as a logistician. And we sent really neat stuff to really exotic locations. And the really neat stuff is still really new. It's still really cool, and it's still there.
John, I don't want to interrupt you, but can you define any of the really neat stuff that you guys shipped out?
No.
Fair enough.
Thank
Please
you
continue.
for asking. No, because it's still real cool and it's still right where we sent it. At any rate, we sent some. Wow. One thing I'll tell you about is Boomerang. It was the neatest piece of equipment that I ever had the opportunity to work with. Boomerang would detect where incoming fire was coming from, automatically direct artillery, and and it would return fire. So it's pretty cool. You shoot at U.S. forces, you're dead. So that was one of the neat things, and that's not a classified piece. You can look that one up. Boomerang. As everybody knows, Desert Shield started officially on August the 7th of 1990. Again, I'm going back to 85 for the preps. That was in response to Iraq's invasion of Kuwait on August the 2nd. So Desert Storm, or the 100-Hour War, saw the first aerial bombardment by F-117 stealth fighters. That was January 17th,
I have a question. I do have a question about that, John. Is the first time F-117s were used, was it in Desert Storm or was it in the Panama invasion?
I do not know that. I believe it was in Desert Storm, January 17th, 1991, from the history I looked up. But what's crucial to note here is that the F-117 was operationally capable as early as 1975, with at least one squadron flying the aircraft. The official first flight of the F-117 was in 1981.
And if you get our e-blasts, Todd wrote a wonderful article about the F-117 actually bringing out of retirement. They're still going to be using the F-117 even now.
Yes, absolutely. If it's not broke, don't fix it. So the point there is, by 1991, mid-1991, the Hornet's nest had been disturbed and setting the stage for 11 September of 2001. So during that time, I worked for what was to become the 9th largest defense contractor in the world. And I drove down to Crystal City using one of our company carpool automobiles from Johnstown down to Crystal City for a company-wide meeting of contract managers from all of our locations, coast to coast, Florida, all the way out to California. And that's my big build up to where were you on 9/11/2001? And I'm going to ask you guys to bear with me on this. It's pretty personal. I'm still angry about it. I'm still not inclined to forgive the attack on the United States. But on the morning of the 11th, we gathered in a 4th floor conference room with no windows at all at the Crystal City Marriott. And we settled in for some crucial update information regarding contracts, corporate ethics, exports, what have you. So our corporate ethics and contracts director, who's a retired Navy captain, started the meeting and touched on the agenda, so on and so forth. And a phone in our conference room rang. And the captain muttered a few curse words and said, not just under his breath, "I told them to send a runner unless the building was on fire." Somebody picked that up. So one of the guys closest to the phone picked it up, and with a very, very puzzled look on his face, he asked if Ms. Smith Jones, whatever, I don't recall her name, was there. And our captain, by now, he was crimson red angry, and he motioned for her to go ahead and take the call. And I'll never forget, her knees buckled, tears flowed out of her eyes, her voice broke, and she said, "Oh no, when? Oh my God." And not hearing the other end of the phone conversation, we, of course, assumed a family tragedy. She dropped the phone to the floor, turned with her eyes filled with tears, and choked out, "They just bombed the World Trade Center." So it didn't take very long for the captain to take control, assume properly that we weren't going to get a lot done, and we adjourned to a lounge just down the hallway. TVs were on, and we saw the tower that had been struck billowing smoke, and to our horror, a live broadcast of the second jet flying into the Twin Towers. That was at 9:02 with 57 seconds, flight 175. crashes into the south face of the South Tower, #2 World Trade Center, between floors 77 and 85. Parts of the plane, including the starboard engine, leave the building from its east and north sides, falling to the ground 6 blocks away. Now, many have heard of the flight or fight response, and those of you that have been in combat know it well. I went from terror to pissed off in about 3 seconds after the South Tower was struck. And little did we know that a state of emergency had been declared in my then hometown of Johnstown. Flight 93 flew over Johnstown at an estimated 5,000 feet. And we're going to circle back to 93. At 9:37 with 46 seconds, Flight 77 crashes into the western side of the Pentagon. It starts a violent fire. Our hotel was about 1,000 yards away from the Pentagon, and the winds carried the thick black smoke and the odor of burning bodies and wood and jet fuel into our window-walled lounge. The TV quickly announces the Pentagon has been severely damaged with unknown casualties. At 10:03, about a half hour later, Flight 93 is crashed by its hijackers as a result of fighting in the cockpit 80 miles southeast of Pittsburgh, just really down the street from my home in Johnstown. That was in Somerset County. Sometime likely 15 minutes before Flight 93 nosedives into that abandoned strip mine, a loud boom is heard in the DC area. And the TV reporters, the talking heads get on there, and they say, State Department has been bombed. It wasn't true. Several of us noted an F-16 fighter jet heading north at relatively low altitude and then heard a boom. The F-16 was supersonic, and the explosion at the State Department was in fact a sonic boom. Shortly after sighting the F-16, the word came from TV reporters that Flight 93 had crashed. Believe what you will, but I will never be convinced that Flight 93 was not shot down to protect either the Capitol or the White House. So DC remained in lockdown, or was placed in lockdown. Reagan National was closed, and leaving that evening was impossible. Rental cars were at a premium. I remember family members calling me to make sure that I was okay, and having to use the house phone to return calls. Cell service was either out or sketchy or overcrowded, who knows. So I finally turned in, but I woke up several times during that evening, flailing about reaching for something. And I have to tell you that the odor of jet fuel, wood, and burned bodies seats itself deep in the recesses of your memory. Never forget it. The HVAC system in the hotel couldn't keep the stench of the hotel, to keep the stench out of the hotel. And it was a month or so later that I was able to connect the dots. What was I reaching for? It was my .45 pistol that was my constant companion during my year in theater during the Vietnam War. One of our contract managers, a lady named Sonia, was out of Melbourne, Florida, and her aunt lived no more than 10 minutes from my home near Johnstown. So around noon, after speaking with her the night before, we drove across Interstate 66, saw the Pentagon, and finally north on 81 and on to home. I dropped her off at her aunt's house, only about 5 minutes from my home. And truthfully, we hardly spoke a word about the terrorist attacks. I still recall that very fateful day, still angry. And I'm not sure if my wife and our 2 boys, a toddler and an infant, greeting me at the front door when I got back from Southeast Asia, or my wife's long hug when I returned from DC was more memorable. I want to thank you, Sean, for the time that you've given me. I know this runs deep, for some of the folks. And I do want to make note of Colonel Washbaw's recollections from last week. They were priceless. He's a great speaker, and I held on his every word. And Sean, thanks for the opportunity to let me tell a story that I've pretty much internalized for a long time. Thanks.
Thank you, John. That was really well written. And whenever I read through it, there were several pieces that really struck me. And I found it very interesting that you and Sonia didn't speak about the attacks on the drive. Being the next day, I think it was something I don't think any of us in my circle ever stopped chatting about. But I do know that there was a level of shock there. So, that's possibly a reason. I think about the moment you got home to your wife that day and the relief there. And I wonder how you helped her cope. I keep going back to this idea of how veterans and servicemen and women dealt with 9/11 on that day, and how they helped their civilian friends and family cope with the chaos and the fear of what was going on. But
John, let me interject. I have to tell you this. I went, I did my Vietnam tour in theater, but not in country. I worked and lived in downtown Taichung, Taiwan. And let's just say it was a relatively easy tour. I was in the chair force for, and, although I had a 45, and that's another long story, I was really in no, particular danger. My wife was stuck here in the United States with a toddler and an infant. Okay. Mm-hmm. So you tell me who had the tougher tour. She was my rock in 1973 and 1974, and she remains my rock to this day. And she was absolutely, positively my rock and my tough guy and my wingman or wing woman. We got to be politically correct. When I got home from Washington, D.C. And I got to tell you, in August, it'll be 52 years of wedded battle. And I see Mary's cracking up over there. I can see her on the screen. Mary, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Anybody who's been married for 52 years and says they haven't had an argument, they're lying. But all kidding aside, my Katie has been, she stuck with me through a whole lot of nonsense and a whole lot of serious. And she's my gal. And I think I'm going to keep her.
That's awesome. That's awesome to hear, John. I can't think of a better note to sort of wrap up this episode, but I do want to open it up to everyone here in the room to see if there's any questions that they have for Pete or for John. I know the one other thing that sort of stuck out to me, John, of your story, if you want to raise your hand, I'll definitely call on you here. But one thing I wanted to actually ask Julia is that from your story, you said you're still mad, and I'm sure there's still a lot of anger. I still feel anger about 9/11, but I wonder if, Julia, if you still feel anger about Pearl Harbor. We should be able to hear you now.
Okay, am I there?
Yeah, we had, we sort of mirrored what happened with 9/11 with what happened with Pearl Harbor. Does that anger subside?
It doesn't. It doesn't. All these years later, you keep thinking, what was anybody thinking? It was just such a shock, absolute shock. So,
Jack?
and it's nice to hear him give credit to his wife too. That's a rare thing.
Jack Morrow, I'll throw the same question to you.
I really have never given that much thought to it. I was a cattle youth of only 16 years of age, and it was just something that happened to our country. I don't know that I give any resentment to it. I guess my term of service in the Marine Corps was the making of me as a human being. And focused me when I was into the rest of my life.
Hmm.
So I don't know where I would have been if it hadn't had happened. So yeah, that's strange, but I just don't give a whole lot of thought to that. But thank you for asking.
Sure. Julia, thank you. Jack, John, boy, it's inspirational, the love that you and your wife share. I thank everyone here. Todd, I want to throw to you. I'm sure you've had a lot of thoughts tonight.
Yeah, I think John's wife deserves a medal, first of all.
Yes, she does.
Just
Yes,
for
she does,
living with
Todd,
him for
absolutely.
52 years. And I'm fascinated by that. And I just, what I'm interested in are people who are serving during 9/11, or people who were inspired to serve because of the attacks on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon. And I think, Sean, I think it would be interesting to kind of highlight, those memories maybe each week with somebody from different perspectives, older, younger, people who are maybe in elementary school even, who later joined the military, or people like John who are, already out, but still felt this tight connection to the military. Yeah, I think this is, it's hard to believe that it's been 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
Hard to believe it's been 20 years.
Yeah, very difficult. And we're going to continue this every week. I'm excited to continue talking with you all about all of your experiences, and not just necessarily focusing on Gulf War post 9/11. Though that's sort of just the title of the program. I still think that there's massive value in understanding everyone's perspectives and how they changed and developed through 9/11. John Haas, I've heard a lot of great things about the story you have to share. Baltimore Ben, I'd love to again highlight you as well. If anyone wants to reach out to me, Todd or myself, and let us know there's a story that you'd like to share about 9/11, something that, like John, if you just want to, get it off your chest, or, talk with all of us about it. I think this is a great opportunity for us to do it. I'm grateful for VBC for offering us the platform to be able to connect this way. And I'm very honored to be able to host this program with you all. With John's love sending us off, I hope to see you all next week. Definitely join us Monday night, Wednesday morning, Thursday night, and Scuttlebutt on Monday. Todd?
Yeah, Monday night we're doing it for the VBC Happy Hour. We'll continue the conversation about Desert Storm. So if you served during Desert Storm, would love to have you join us and share memories. I'm especially recruiting members of the USS Louisville and members of the USS Pittsburgh, which were the two submarines under, I think it was the Red Sea. I think they weren't in the Persian Gulf. I think they were in the Red Sea. I could be wrong about that. And they fired Tomahawk missiles, I believe, a Desert Storm, the first time that submarines fired, against land targets in combat. So I would love to have that perspective on Monday night. We've recruited a few people for that. So, but if you know anybody who served on one of those submarines, would love to have them join us.
Great. Thank you all. Have a wonderful evening.
All right. Good night, everyone.